Good morning, everyone. So this is a guide to threat hunting and incident responses. So a little background about who I am. I work as a senior AppSec engineer at Cobalt Labs. So at Cobalt Labs, we do pen testing as a service for other companies. I have 7+ years of experience in security with different products, namely retail, telematics, fintech products, and I've been involved with blue and red teaming efforts. So fun fact, this is my first conference, so I hope this goes good. Okay, so I'll just quickly take us through the agenda. So I just want to do a quick overview of what is blue team. Then we can go into what is threat hunting process, techniques, understanding the attack kill chain, how a threat hunt actually figures into the attack kill chain, a very simple case study, and then how we can have a maturity model for the organizations, and then a quick Q&A at the end. So blue teaming overview. So basically, blue teaming, as all of us know, is anything and everything related to safeguarding the organization and its assets. So all the techniques I've listed here, namely defensive security, threat hunting, damage control, all these things together, they form the efforts of a blue team. So, but what we'll be concentrating mostly on would be threat hunting and incident response in this presentation. So threat hunting. I have put up a poll. Can you guys just respond to the poll? Okay, so anyways, I don't think it's working. So let's just move ahead. So threat hunting, let's start. So CrowdStrike, as we all know, is a vendor for threat hunting tools. So they defined threat hunting as a practice for proactively searching for cyber threats lurking in the network, which generally go undetected if you're using a tool or something. But there's a lot of people within the industry also think that using tools is more a reactive approach to threat hunting rather than a proactive one. So I would say it's partly both of them, not just one or the other, because if you are using threat hunting tools, has already gone ahead and done a use case on that. They've figured out that, okay, this use case actually helps us detect these threat vectors, threat actors in the network, and then they've gone ahead and automated the whole workflow. So it's basically using somebody else's workflow and for yourself, which gets incorporated in all these tools. So it's not one or the other, it's mostly a combination of both of them. Which brings me to my second point: you hunt once and detect always, which is the golden rule for threat hunting. So you can't have, so if you have a threat hunting team, you can't have all of them running the same threat hunt. That's not conducive for an environment. So if you've gone ahead and done a threat hunt, you need to automate that so that it's not an overhead for the other people in your team, and you are always detecting the same workflow over and over again. Because it might be that the first time you run that threat hunt, you might not get any results, but that does not eliminate an attack happening for the same use case in your network. So how can you actually categorize threat hunts? So threat hunts are categorized into two categories broadly: unstructured and structured. So an unstructured one, like we discussed, are basically more towards the reactive one, where you have all your tools in place and they serve as triggers or alerts for which you actually go ahead and do the analysis and maybe more research based on whatever the triggers are, and then define whatever threat was found by the tools, whether they were false positive or do you actually need to perform an incident response to them. A structured one is more towards the proactive one, which CrowdStrike usually talks about. So in a structured one, structured threat hunt, you're basically looking for a few catchphrases like indicators of attack, which means you're looking for any indication of attacks or attackers that can be found in your environment. It could be hash values, it could be some files which were downloaded from the internet, it could be anything. So these are your indicators of compromise. Indicator of attacks would be something which can be used to identify an attack. So a compromise is basically indicator of compromise is basically any artifact found on the on your environment, which suggests that, okay, so suppose you have a Word file which was downloaded from the internet, you have hash available for them. So if from whichever website or portal you downloaded the file, they present you with a hash for the integrity check, and the one which you have on your system, the hash values don't match. So that's one of the indicators of compromise. So similarly, indicator of attacks would be something like in your network, where if you see a constant increase of say something like an increase in network packets. Suppose if one of the machines on your network is only supposed to be active during a certain time frame, and it's still active outside of that time frame, that could be a potential indicator of attack. So then there are tactics, techniques, procedures. These are basically used for identifying adversaries. So whatever tactics an attacker uses, what kind of techniques and procedures they've been using. So all these are listed on Meter Attack, which is a common a global knowledge base based on current events which have happened, and you can always find all these things there. So your structured threat hunt would depend on all these things. So let's quickly dive into the process. So there are mainly 5 processes when you're doing threat hunt. It's mostly collecting data, setting up a hypothesis, threat hunt, identifying the threat, and response. So if you do a little search, most of the time, collection of data comes after establishing a hypothesis. But what I have found mostly is that you can only establish a hypothesis when you have enough data about your environment, about your tech stack, about everything of your organization. So once you have data, that is when you can make an educated hypothesis. So let's... So like I said, the first step, you need to know everything about the landscape of your operating environment, whether it's network data, what are your high value assets, what are, if you've been doing vulnerability scans. So you need to have all these reports. You need to specifically know about what are the security policies and guidelines of your company and the infrastructure before you can actually proceed and do a threat hunt. Just a second. Yeah. So then you need to define an attack surface. An attack surface could be network, IT infrastructure, personnel, the applications you're using. All these could probably be potential attack surfaces, and you need to go into detail on what are your company policies around these things. So you need to also, once you've captured all of those information, then you need to start your data collection. So your data collection has to be from all these points. You can have IDS systems, you can have SIEM systems, you can have data packet analyzers. So if you are leveraging cloud services, you need to have data from your clouds. If you have endpoint, there are endpoint tools for Macs, for Windows, for Linux machines. You need to have all these data, and you need to have a central repository or a log aggregator where you collect all these data and you can analyze them on a single portal. So the next we come to establish the hypothesis. So once you have all the data and you have all your logs and all your data in a central repository, basically what you go ahead and do is you create hypotheses or educated guesses. This is going to be this baseline for threat hunts, which you'll be conducting for your establishment. So then we get into the actual threat hunting once you've done all this. So you can use manual techniques, you can use tools So basically what happens at this point is, say you've established a hypothesis saying, okay, I have users with Windows machines, and they have sufficient admin privileges. And so what are the potential threats a user with sufficient admin privileges on a Windows machine can have? So this is a potential hypothesis you can use, and your threat hunt for this particular hypothesis should be to either prove or disprove your hypothesis. At this step, if you are not able to prove your hypothesis, does not mean that you have failed at your threat hunt. It just means that this is a potential for not having a baseline at this point. But once you automate this, there could be a possibility in the future where this could be proved. So I'm sorry for the screenshot if it's not pretty clear. So this is from CrowdStrike. So when we talk about threat huntings, we also talk about data enrichments, which if your organization is using EDR tools, which is endpoint detection and response tools. So data enrichment is one of the features almost, I think, all of the tools provide. So basically what happens is, if you have like a potential PowerShell, which is marked by the EDR tool as malicious, and you need to investigate, data enrichment is going to give you like the whole start to the end point, how the process was spawned, what kind of files it was accessing, for how long was it accessing, did it write or rewrite any files, any registry files, any important files. It's going to highlight everything related to that one process. So this is something which is incredibly important and efficient when doing a threat hunt. So so you've done your threat hunt. Now you have a list of threats, potential threats you've identified. So the part where you identify threat is basically based on your policies, your organization policies. You have to identify whether these policies are still valid for your organization, or can you defer them, or maybe these are low-hanging fruits. You basically assign severity to your threats, and you also identify whether they are false positives at this point. So most of the time, if it's a startup, the person who is doing threat hunt, they are the ones who will be conducting the next step, which is the incident response. So they usually combine the fourth and fifth step. But if you are a large corporate, so you can probably collect all the evidences as part of your identification of the threat, like from the EDR tool and other tools you're using, and then you send it across to the incident response team, who are going to take this forward. The other thing at this point is you need to automate your threats. So like we discussed in some slides before this, you hunt once and you detect it always. So once you are complete with one hunt, you have to go ahead and automate that, so that you'll be able to identify the same threat or similar threats again and again. So the incident response. So you've identified a threat, and now what you have to do is, you've gotten all the information, the evidences, making certain that, okay, this is a threat, you marked severity, you have everything. So you've done your preparations, you have detected, you have analyzed it. So now what you need to do is contain, eradicate, and recovery. So you can't just rely on detecting a threat, you need to remediate it as well. So these are some of the steps which you do as part of incident response. And then comes the post-incident activity, where you need to inform all the stakeholders about what has happened with a very detailed report about what kind of evidences were collected, what kind of damage was done, what was the remediation steps, and what were the lessons learned from this activity, so that we can better the security posture. So these are some of the threat hunting techniques which are used. Most of these threat hunting techniques are already collaborated within the threat hunting tools, like searching. So searching is basically just querying for collected data. So if you're using an EDR for endpoints, you have the option for querying specific data. Like if you want to see what kind of applications are installed across all the systems on your network, you can do that. So then there is clustering and grouping. Clustering and grouping and even stack counting actually figures into the part of outlier analysis. So basically what they do is they do a statistical analysis of all the data collected, and then they define, okay, so if you have like say a sample set of 10 incidents, and one of the incidents is something is different than what was expected. So you have like a definitive parameter for defining that these are the incidents, how they should be behaving. But this one incident is outside, so that forms the basis for another threat hunt. So you need to actually check that one particular incident and go through the whole analysis and threat hunting process to figure out whether that is actually a potential threat or a false positive. So this is how clustering and grouping actually happens. So for these clustering and grouping, you need to have a very large sample set. A smaller set might give you more false positives. Stack counting or stacking is basically frequency analysis of the data. So how frequent this kind of data is happening. So you can always check when you are doing data enrichment using EDR tools, you can always check that if the baseline says this particular user has been accessing the internet during these times. So there's a timeline. So if you need to check whether they are doing it outside the work hours, a very normal use case. So that can be an identifier, and you need to do more research or an analysis on why the timeline differs from the previous baselines. So just something to think about when you're doing threat hunting, when you're employing these techniques. Machine learning is basically mostly towards threat intelligence platform, which they use. So they have statistical models and algorithms. So it basically uses machine learning to learn from the previous ones, previous threats which were identified, so that in the other techniques where you are the one who are actually analyzing the data and marking whether they are a false positive or not, a machine learning tools would probably be learning from those baselines and trying to change or upgrade the algorithms themselves. So these are some of the tools which you can actually use for threat hunting. So for SIEMs, you can use Splunk, Sumo Logic. For EDRs, there's Falcon by CrowdStrike, Carbon Black by VMware, Endgame by Elastic just bought Endgame. So for threat intelligence platforms, you have Radar by Apporwa. So you also need digital forensic and incident response distribution tools like Sysmon for Windows. This is basically for gathering intelligence when you're doing a threat hunt and you've identified a threat and you want to rule something out. So before you actually get into the incident response, you need to have all these things. So let's now we know how a threat hunting works. We know what are the techniques. We know how exactly what kind of tools we are using and what's the life cycle. So let's just take a step back and understand what is an attack kill chain. So an attack kill chain is going to usually look like this with 7 stages. The first stage is reconnaissance. It's basically doing all the research available for your targets. So an attacker is going to use everything available at their disposal on the internet, whether it's phishing, whether it's doing random checks, whatever. If they've identified a target, or if they need to even identify targets based on maybe their preferences. So this is the research part of the attack kill chain. The second part comes to weaponization. So an attacker can decide whether they want to use, say, a PDF or a Word file and just weaponize it, embedding a malicious code into that and send it across to their targets for proceeding on the attack kill chain. The third part is the delivery. How this weapon, the PDF embedded with the malicious code is going to get delivered to the target is what delivery is about. Usually the method used at this point is phishing, but we've also seen from a lot of breaches where a lot of attackers use USB sticks and they just throw them in the parking lot, and someone might just pick it up and, you know, say, oh, a free USB, and just insert it into their laptops, and that's also a delivery. The fourth part comes to exploitation. So as soon as a delivery happened, suppose it was phishing. So you got an email from an attacker and you did not suspect it was phishing. So you click on the link, and the link opens to a file, to a portal, and it asks you for credentials, and maybe it looks like it doesn't look so suspicious, and you go ahead and add credentials, or maybe it just starts downloading something and unknowingly to you on your system. So this is the part where exploitation actually happens. So delivered, you got the delivery of the weapon, and then it starts exploiting it. So in this case, if it was like a PDF, you opened the link, you downloaded the PDF, you opened the PDF, and the code embedded inside the PDF starts running. And whatever the code's intended to do, say, then in the next step, it's installation, it installs a backdoor on your system. Which takes us to part 6, which is command and control. Basically, the attacker needs to have persistent access to the target's system to actually carry out whatever is their objective. Their objective could be anything: data exfiltration, network spreading, system disruption, anything. So at the point when we reach 7, your system or the target has been effectively compromised. So where does threat hunting actually figure into this whole attack kill chain? So threat hunting detection timeline starts at point 3 till 7. And as you can see, I've marked as in how you progress down the line, the damage keeps on increasing. So generally, we see that a lot of people, a lot of organizations are not able to detect a massive attack till point 5. But if it's a very low grade and not a highly targeted attack, you should be able to identify at 3 and 4th point. So let's just take a very basic, simple case study to understand how both of them, the threat hunting and the attack chain kill chain actually works together. So I have a case study, the one where Betty loves cats. Who doesn't? So who is Betty? Betty is the HR manager for company A. Betty loves cats. Betty's extremely active on social media, and Betty stores all her data on her laptop. So Alice is the attacker. Alice was hired by a disgruntled ex-employee, Claire, and Alice's main objective is just to disrupt all activity and to get basically Claire's motive was to get back at Betty, so she's using Alice to do that. So we know who Claire is at this point. So let's just study something about how Alice's kill chain actually looks like. So the first stage, recon, Alice already has a lot of information from Claire about Betty and company A, and she does her own research on the internet as well, and whatever is available at her disposal. The second part is weaponization. So Alice devises, so she creates a Word document, and then she prepares everything. So she knows Betty likes cats, so she devises coupon codes for cat spas, and she embeds a malicious code into the Word document. For the delivery, Alice creates a web page for cat lovers where you have to actually get the coupon code from the Word document which gets downloaded and then enter that. So Betty receives a phishing email. She clicks on the link. She sees, oh, okay, so there's a cat spa happening, and whatever downloaded document she got, she opens it. She sees, okay, so macros have been disabled, but I have admin privileges. Why not open it so I can get a coupon code I know a lot of red flags happening at the same point. So she gets the coupon code, she enters, she gets a free gift voucher, she goes there and she forgets about it. She does not inform anyone. At this point, the hash of this macro-enabled document is going to be our indicator of compromise. So the exploitation, how does it happen? So the downloaded file contains a macro. It spawns a PowerShell in the background. The PowerShell actually goes ahead and downloads an executable file from a portal. And what the executable file is, it is a program which wipes Betty's disk completely. So because the objective of Alice is not to actually control or data exfiltration from Betty's laptop, it's just disruption. She doesn't need 0.6, so she's actually just completed her objective at this point. So how can we actually disrupt Alice's kill chain using threat hunting? So let's go back a few steps. Let's call this stage 0. So we have a hypothesis which we were discussing about during the process. So say the hypothesis in this case is a user may download a Microsoft Word document with malicious code embedded and run it unknowingly because your organization has a trust policies with employees and they have admin privileges to their Windows machine. So this is one of the hypotheses you can use based on the information was available from your from the whole landscape of your organization. So these are some of the data points which will help you. Sorry, just excuse me. Yeah, so these are some of the data points which are going to actually help you identify and prove or disprove your hypothesis. So you need to collect system logs, event logs, network logs, mail server logs, and even EDR logs. A lot of startups or companies which have just started do not use EDRs, but that's completely okay. That's a personal call for the organizations, but there are advantages of having an EDR. So you have a log aggregator, you have all these data points, and you push all these logs to a single aggregator. You can use all these techniques. They could be built in within your SIEM tool. They could be something which you maybe once you do integration with your log aggregator, you run some queries and you do this. So it's all based on how you want to conduct your threat hunt. So in this particular case, for Alice's kill chain, sorry. So what are we actually going to be looking at? So we have a hypothesis. This is before the kill chain was actually activated. So your hypothesis is based on your landscape of your organization. So based on that, what do you want to actually search for? So you want to actually search for 3 events in this point. Event ID 1, 11, and 15 in case of Windows machine. So you can always read up on, because there are a lot of event IDs. So basically event 1 is for process creation, 11 is for, I think it's for process identification, and 15 is basically for what gets downloaded from the internet. So you have a lot of event IDs. So based on that, you what you do is you do a search on your log aggregators for these kind of events. So because this particular attack has not actually happened, this is before the attack. So you're running a proactive threat hunt. So you, at this point, you will have a baseline. So you might not actually get hits for proving your hypothesis, but this is where you actually define your baseline, that this is how, when there has been no threats encountered, this is what it's going to be. You might get some false positives at this point, but after you do a threat hunt and analysis, you should be able to rule them out. So once you've done this step, like I said, you hunt once and you automate that. You automate this threat hunt, and then you set up alerts for these kind of hypotheses. So based on stage 0, you had this hypothesis, you had alerts, and once Alice's kill chain was at the delivery stage, you were alerted. So you've identified a potential threat, and now you need to do an incident response step. So I want to explicitly say that if you're not using EDR tools at this point, and you're just using your log aggregators and other tools and setting up alerts for a threat like this, if it's a massive breach or an attack on your system, just having an alert does not actually ensure that it's going to actually stop or isolate the attack. So in this case, if you actually have an EDR tool in place, even if it's like a false positive, usually what they do is they isolate the host or the attack or the process, which is actually seems like a potential attack, and then you can actually analyze and mark it whether it's a potential threat or not. So this brings us to stage 2, where we know detection alone is not enough. We need to be responding to the threats. How can you respond to the threats? You have to know about the enemy. You have to have information on the environment. You have to know the capabilities of your tool and the limitations. So you've identified the threat, you've analyzed it, you've categorized the severity. Now you're doing an incident response. So the first step would be isolating the threat so that it doesn't spread. The second would be probably checking through the network whether the infection has actually propagated to other hosts, other endpoints on your network. So you need to do a thorough check, analyze what's the severity or what's the damage actually happened on the infected machine. And that is when you go to the next step, which is recovery. Can you actually recover? So if Alice's aim was to disrupt Betty's work because Betty has everything on her machine, so erasing the complete disk for Betty is something which Alice has been able to achieve. So your recovery would basically mean, was Betty actually saving anything as backups? Was she using your cloud services if you have any? So all these questions have to be answered and have to be documented as part of recovery, whether you were able to do a successful recovery or not as well. The lessons learned would be based on how was the attacker actually able to carry out the attack? What kind of attack was actually carried out on the organization? And what were the tools, techniques, tactics, everything employed, and how best can you stop something like this from happening again? Your incident report is going to contain all this data. It has to be very exhaustive. It has to it has to have stakeholders. It has to have what are the steps which were taken, and what are the remediation steps which you'll be doing. So when we talk about knowing your enemy, Meter Attack actually has, if you go on their website, they have a really exhaustive list of how, what kind of potential attack an attacker can use, the tactics, techniques, procedures, and how best to safeguard yourself. So if we talk about Alice's kill chain at this point. So this is something, so at this point, we know what Alice's kill chain was, but when you are on the other side, it's a best guess when you are doing this, but it gives you a broader perspective of what are the loopholes within your organization. So when we talk about initial access, so how was the attacker actually able to access or target us or the organization? So at this point, it was phishing. So you need to have user awareness programs within your organization to make sure that users are able to actually identify phishing. And you need to also actually have, not a program, but you need to have a team in place, or at least a group where the users have to report certain phishing which they've come across. So this is going to actually improve your security posture. So the next step would be execution. So exploitation of client execution. So in this case, Alice was able to exploit Microsoft Word because Microsoft Word allows for macros to be embedded. So she was able to actually exploit that part. So the next part would, so mitigation for this would be disable macros across your organization as a security policy and as a check. So EDR tools actually allow you to do this. And you can enforce this. So users, even though if they have admin access to some of the things, they can't do. They need proper rights, or maybe they need to contact the IT admins or whoever is monitoring your tools to actually give a proper justification of why they want macros enabled for their use cases. User execution, again, goes back to how were they able to execute such an attack was through phishing, which goes back that we need to have strong user awareness programs within the organization to boost up security awareness. So third part comes to how was the defense evaded. Basically, a good guess would be impairing defenses, where if Alice was able to actually move past step 3, like go to the exploitation part. So Alice was able to bypass all the tools and tools which were in place for detecting any breaches or any malicious activities happening on the endpoints. So how do you make sure? So basically, if you have tools like EDRs, there are policies you can enable. And there are levels for the policies. You can have very aggressive policies which blocks almost everything, or you can have some more lax policies based on what is the security policy or guidelines for your organization. So based on that, the EDR tool is going to mark processes which are going to get spawned on each and every endpoint. But you still can actually set up alert systems on these tools so that even though they are not blocking or maybe isolating these processes which are happening, you still get reminders or alerts so that you can actually go ahead and check, or the security team in your organization can actually go ahead and check these things. So next is the impact. Data encrypted for impact, data destruction. Okay, sorry, I think I added it again. Okay, and data wipe. So basically, this is a guess for us at this point because we don't know what was the end result for Alice's kill chain, because it was disrupted at stage 3. But if it was carried out, it would have resulted in, based on the case study, the disk wipe and data destruction. So how do you actually respond to these things? You have to have backups, you have to have data encrypted, you have to use, if you have cloud services, you have to use them. So everything at your disposal, you have to use them, you have to create user awareness so that your users are actually using everything and abiding by the security policies of your organization. So now we've discussed a lot of things ranging from threat hunting to attack kill chains and how both of them actually work together. So how do you actually use threat hunting as part of a security activity in your organization? So threat hunting maturity model. So your organization could be at any level in a threat hunting maturity model, and you could still use a lot of tools to just enhance them. So the maturity model basically ranges from 0 to 4, which is initial, minimal, procedural, innovative, leading. So you basically at the very initial stage, what you need the most is to have the reactive part of threat hunting. You need to have tools so that like EDRs, like SIM tools, so that you are aware of what is happening in your organization so that you can do an effective incident response. The next step would be actually working on top of whatever is present, like the EDRs, SIMs, having more applications and collecting logs for monitoring activities. And if you have the budget and and you can expand on this, then you start leveraging other capabilities of threat hunting. So that is how you progress from 0 to level 4. So any question? I think we have 4 minutes. Okay, let me see. Please make slide deck for this. Okay, yeah, I can share the slide deck. Could you please explain the interface of CrowdStrike in more detail if there is time? Okay, let me just go back to this. Is this visible? Okay. Yeah, okay. So basically, this is a data enrichment from CrowdStrike. So as you can see, this is regarding a PowerShell, which was probably spawned on one of the machines. As you can see, this okay, let's just start from the left top left. You can see the details about the host. The host here would be the endpoint where this PowerShell has been running. What kind of other processes are running, it's going to detail that. Then you have other details, detections, what all users are present on the host. You have network details, network logs about the host. So the whole legend on the left side is going to tell you all the details about the host. So if you go on the right side, you can see that it's going to tell you more about the PowerShell running. So at the top, it will tell you about the runtime, what kind of commands were used to run this PowerShell. These are all data enrichment points, just so that you can analyze about how the PowerShell was actually spawned, and you gives you more perspective on whether to classify this as a potential threat or not. So it gives you the file path from where this PowerShell was actually spawning. As you can see, it was running from a device. So this is probably a USB device, which it was running from. It was not running from the hard disk. So then you can see hashes available. So there is a website. I can probably just link it here in the chat. virustotal.com. So if you have any hashes available on your EDR tools, or if you find something, you can always do a quick search on VirusTotal. Sometimes I think there's a VirusTotal score also mentioned here. So sometimes a lot of EDR tools pull data from there also, but you can do your own search for that. It's going to let you know if a lot of people in the community have already flagged this hash to be probably containing malware or any information, so that you have more insights on what's actually happening or what kind of PowerShell process this is. So changing hash values for attackers is not that big of a feat. So you need to take this with a grain of salt. So as you can see, as you go down on the right side, after the hash values, you have some other additions from VirusTotal score. These are all picked up from VirusTotal. You can also go ahead and have more detailed information there. Then you have information on the user, when they were last logged in, the login date, machines. And then once you go at the bottom, you have the whole detail about the process. So the best part about using an EDR tool is, one of the things is that if you identify a process which is malicious and you think the potential of this threat could be extremely detrimental for the organization, you can definitely kill the process before as a fail-safe at this point. So you do have these options. So you can kill the process. You have prepare a file for download. If it's changing some files, or if it's like a downloadable file, you can download those files and you can create a VM on your system and you can run them in a safe environment just to check, do a reverse analysis, engineering, and just to see whether it's just to do your proper analysis for this threat. So does that answer your question? Yes. So you have, so CrowdStrike also has integrations with SIEM tools. You can use Sumo Logic, you can use Splunk, or even Elastic has a couple of, I think, Elasticsearch, they have something in their stack as SIEM tools. So you have integrations with EDR. So if you are using an EDR which does not have inbuilt integrations, you can always contact teams. They give you custom, or they help you out with custom integrations with SIEM tools. Okay, I think that is it. So thank you so much for the talk. I had a really good time. I hope this was helpful.